If you want to have a really good looking trellis that's going to last for years to come and offer you the opportunity to have a whole bunch of crops, stay tuned and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do that in your own garden. So when it comes to arch trellises, in this video we're going to discuss three things: infrastructure, what it's made of, how you set it up. The second thing we're going to talk about is where you locate it in your garden or the options you may have. And the third and final thing, probably the most important thing, is how you actually get a lot of crops to grow on it at one time, because that's ultimately what you want as an end result. The arch trellis that you see right here is one that we're no longer using. We had cucumbers on it. They eventually died off. So this is a good example of what to look at as far as what arch trellis I recommend that you use. I recommend that you use a cattle panel arch trellis, which is what you see right here. They're durable. They're going to last a really long time. They're relatively inexpensive and they're easy to get. When I say that these things are easy to get, that simply means that most farm stores carry them. You basically have two options when you set up a cattle panel trellis. You set it up on a raised bed like this one, going over to this one, or you place them directly on the ground like you can see here. You've got the cattle panel on the ground on that side, and then it goes over and touches the ground on this side. It's a little difficult to see with all the plants at the moment, but I'm sure you get the idea. For the trellises, I recommend you use the 12-foot lengths. They come in smaller sizes, but 12 seems to be the perfect size. If you're worried about how you're going to transport the cattle panels back to your house, there are a lot of videos out there on YouTube that you can watch that will teach you how to transport these safely back to your house. The reason why I recommend using a 12-foot cattle panel trellis is because it seems to be about the perfect size that you can walk under. I'm just under 6 feet and I can easily walk under this trellis right here. It allows things to grow down so you can harvest them. And the main reason is actually because you want to make sure there's 5 feet in between where the cattle panel touches the ground over here and over here on either side. That's where you're going to put your T-posts or whatever you want to use to secure the cattle panel trellis. You want 5 feet in between those posts, and that's what's going to make it a really nice equal U shape for you that you can walk underneath, harvest food, and it's not going to be way too tall. It's not going to be way too wide where you have to duck to get underneath it. So 5 feet is what I recommend in between each T-post on each side of the cattle panel trellis. So if you are a homesteader and you do not have these T-posts that look like this, you need to go and get some because they are very important. They serve lots of uses. And there's a T-post right there in the middle of the cattle panel trellis. You can see it's about right in the middle. That's the right side. This is the left side. The T-post is directly in the middle, pounded into the ground, and it goes up there supporting one side of the T-post. Now, obviously it's hard to see with all of these leaves. This over here would be the other T-post on the opposite side of the post I just showed you that goes up in the middle of the trellis on this side. Now, the way I secure my cattle panels to the T-posts is simply using zip ties. I've had these on there for a couple years. They're just regular black zip ties I got off of Amazon. They haven't broke. They haven't faded from the sun. They haven't weathered away in the cold, hot weather we get here in Wisconsin. They seem to be doing just fine. And if they did break or something, you simply just put new ones on. It's a very affordable way. And it's a very simple way of securing things to the post if you need to. Now, I kind of pride myself on not using T-posts if I don't have to. I like using natural things like this post right here that I got from a tree limb that fell in my yard and I cut the post to use that. I really enjoy using those instead. But when it comes to securing something in the ground, like an arch trellis that's steel and you really want to make sure that's there and secure, I do recommend using T-posts instead of posts like you see over here. So if I walk to the edge of my garden, I'm heading south, north is behind me. Notice that those trellises right there, some of them are done for the year because plants have died off. It's just getting to that point in time, harvest season here in Wisconsin. Notice that that is the north side of the garden. And that's really important because those are going to keep all of the plants in front of them having full access to sun. I do not like planting tall things on the south side of the garden because those belong on the north side of the garden where they can gather the sun, and everything on either side of me right here, which is quite a bit. We've harvested a lot, but I still have quite a bit of harvesting to do yet. That all needs access to sun. So I recommend your cattle panel trellises or any type of trellising thing goes on the north side of your garden if you can help it. The final thing I'd like to discuss with you, and this is probably the most important thing that I overlooked when I first started gardening, and I did not have great luck with these trellises at all. I was looking forward to these beautiful trellises, these lush green leaves going over. I just thought that'd be such a cool thing to have in my garden. And as it turned out, I hardly had anything growing up them at all, and it was almost kind of embarrassing because you look at this big structure that's empty, taking up space, and basically useless in your yard. So I want you to avoid that by doing this. It is not a popular topic, but I just want to say, if your soil underneath your arch trellis, from this side all the way over there, if that soil is not good, you will have bad luck growing things. People don't like to discuss soil as much as they like discussing infrastructure and how things look and harvesting. I know those videos get way more attention on YouTube, but you will not have an arch trellis that's growing all of this food right here. It will not do well if the soil down there is not good to begin with. So this is what I did to make sure I had good soil for years to come. I mentioned earlier that the post over there and the post over there that supports this arch trellis is 5 feet in between. So it's 5 feet from this post to that post. The arch trellis is 4 feet deep, okay? So that means that the soil underneath it, if you made a box basically like I kind of did, is 4 by 5. What I did is I made sure that soil was really, really good. In other words, I created a mini raised bed, just 6 inches off the ground, because our native soil here is not that great. These are cedar fence pickets. I highly recommend using cedar fence pickets if you want a cheap, simple raised bed. These are, like I said before, 4 feet by 5 feet, so there was some cutting involved. It's nice because this board right here is actually supported by this T-post and the cattle panel, so it's not going to bow out. It's only 6 inches off the ground over here, which means that the soil that we put in there is not going to want to push it out. If I went any higher, I'd have to stake it down over here. But because we've done that, because we made this little tiny raised bed, this little 5 by 4 raised bed, which is pretty tiny, we now have a lot of things going on. And this is not even peak season. As you can tell, my potatoes have already died off. It is getting late in the season. But just underneath here and going up here, we've had a whole bunch of crops this summer already. This is our huge zucchini plant that's pretty much done. Flowers are no longer coming. We've harvested plenty of zucchini just off this one plant. On the opposite side, we have these peppers right here. These are lunchbox peppers, they call them. They don't get much bigger than this, but you get far more peppers on each plant. We have a plant over here with plenty of fruit that still needs to ripen, as you can see. And we have some over here that still need to ripen. I have these little electric fence posts right here just to stabilize them because the plants have gotten rather tall. So just in this little raised bed, I have 2 pepper plants that are doing well, a zucchini plant that's already done really well, and as I back up here, all of these butternut squash plants that are doing extremely well also. The type of soil that we put in these raised beds for all of our trellises is actually not soil, it's cow manure compost that we purchased locally from a place down the road. We're very lucky to have a garden and landscape company just 4 miles down the road from us where we can purchase things in bulk. If you don't have access to something like that, it's not a huge deal to get soil or cow manure compost or whatever you want to use in the bags from a big box store. It's going to be far more expensive, but it's still going to work. Now, there are so many different things that you can put on these trellises like this. I mentioned the butternut squash. I had cucumbers on the other one up by the house that you saw on the side, and those worked out really well. We got tons of cucumbers and we have lots of pickles now for the rest of the year. But what if you want to do something else, like indeterminate tomatoes that are going to keep growing up? That's a really good thing to grow on these trellises. What if you want to do pole beans, so green beans that basically grow up and keep climbing until the end of the season, like I have over here behind me? That would be a really good option as well. These here are my favorite green beans I've ever grown. They're called rattlesnake green beans. They're really cool. They've got purple stripes in them. When you cook them, the purple comes out. You're probably wondering why they're so big. That's not how they're supposed to be when you harvest them. They're supposed to be more like this size. But what I'm doing is I'm leaving a whole bunch of really big ones on here. I'm letting them grow because I'm going to let them dry on the vine and I want to save the seed for next year. I'm going to give some away to family and friends. And I'm going to keep some for myself because these have grown so prolifically that I'm actually going to keep them for next year instead of just ordering the same kind online like I did this year. So they're just really, really good. And this is what you can get if you have good soil underneath and you've got quality seed growing up the side of the trellis, as you see right here. These are all beans. And again, this is the end of the season. You see the leaves are yellowing down there. We're getting to the point where I do need to start pulling some of these plants. So the pepper plants and the zucchini in that first arch trellis, those did great just because there's plenty of space for all of that. It's nice to have two little plants, maybe a big one with that size of a raised bed. But if you look here, you can also plant a ton of celery. Now this back here I talked about in a different video. These beans did not do well. The seeds were really bad. You need good soil, you need good seeds, you need good sunlight in the back of your garden. That's what you want to do with these trellises. I was missing the seed portion, so never mind that. But down here, these celery plants we grew from seed in the house, and these are doing really well also. They're going to need to be picked probably this week so we can freeze them for the winter. So if you want to put celery underneath your arch trellis, you certainly can. As far as the plants you use underneath your arch trellises, you can put whatever you want. I made the mistake of not putting anything under my arch trellises the first year, and I just had this big empty space, this 5x4 empty space where nothing grew. And I regretted it because it was just a waste of space and something easily could have grown underneath there, like celery, like peppers, like zucchini, or anything else. So in our garden, we have, if you haven't seen our garden yet, these really big raised beds with a lot of space in between them, wood chips. There's 4 feet in between. And so I said there needs to be 5 feet between each post. So you put a post in 6 inches on that side, 6 inches on that side. That's why we have so much space in between these raised beds. That's not the most efficient use of space, but someday I think we're probably going to put more trellises in between them, and that's why they're like that. I could have put more raised beds on this side of the garden, but I like that there's a big space in here for a wheelbarrow or a wagon, and then you can put these arch trellises over top, connecting the two, so to speak. I think that'd be a really nice feature. So you can do that as well if you have raised beds with a decent gap in between them. There are all sorts of crops you can grow on the arch trellises and underneath them. Don't sell yourself short. You can grow tomatoes underneath them if they're bush tomatoes, celery like we do. Peppers are great because they don't get too tall. You can throw some onions in there, all kinds of things. Do some herbs, make use of the space that you have under the trellis, and of course going over the trellis as well. If there's more information you're looking for concerning arch trellises, homesteading, or gardening in general, please list those down in the comments. I try to get back to everybody within 24 hours if I can. Otherwise, make sure you subscribe to our channel, be part of this journey as we go to more and more self-sufficiency, and check out one of my other videos over here that can help you if you're in the same journey that we are, trying to be more self-sufficient by simplifying our life to increase its quality. Thanks for stopping by.